groovy. Shoryuken!
アーケードゲーム最新作スーパースト 2X
Capcom.
Hey everybody, Jim here. Welcome back for the second part of my Street Fighter game collection. This time we're taking a look at all the 32-bit games in my collection, and in my opinion, the mid and late 90s was really the best time for Capcom fighting games in general. This is when a lot of my favorites were released, like the Street Fighter Alpha games, and also like Rival Schools, Darkstalkers, Star Gladiator, lots of really good stuff, and just an all-around excellent time to be a fighting game fan. So this, I'll go on record as saying this is my personal favorite era for 2D fighting games, and it's my favorite era for Street Fighter. And with that being said, let's get started and have a look at the 32-bit Street Fighter games in my collection. Okay, to start out, I have essentially various 32-bit iterations of Street Fighter 2, or to be more exact, Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, starting with the 3DO version, which is called Super Street Fighter 2 X, the Grandmaster Challenge. And I'm not a huge fan of the 3DO as a console, but it does have a handful of really good games on it. And this is actually a very good port of Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. It looks good, it sounds good, and it plays good as well. The only thing that kind of hinders it is that the 3DO controller isn't exactly the best for fighting games. It's not terrible, mind you. It's not like playing on, you know, like a 2-button PC Engine controller or the old school 3-button Mega Drive pad. It's not as bad as that, but it's not as good as playing on a PlayStation controller or a Saturn controller or even a Super Nintendo controller. So this is a really great version of this game. Just maybe not the best control pad for a Street Fighter game, but still very cool. Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo on the 3DO. These next two are the exact same game for the PlayStation and Saturn, the Street Fighter Collection. I almost was tempted to say Street Fighter 2 Collection, because in this collection you have Super Street Fighter 2 and Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, and you also have Street Fighter 2. And essentially I reach for this primarily the Saturn version, because I have PlayStation and Saturn versions of pretty much all these games, and the Saturn, I think, is just, in my personal opinion, better for 2D fighters. The controller is definitely better for those kinds of games, and I guess they just run better on the Saturn. I know that it does have a processor that's dedicated specifically to 2D graphics, so maybe that's why, but generally speaking, yes, I prefer to play my 2D fighters on my Saturn if possible. But basically, I reach for this when I want to play Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo on my Saturn, because this is an amazing port of that game. The graphics, sound, control, everything is just arcade perfect. If I want to play Street Fighter 2, I pull Street Fighter 2 off the shelf, so I don't really need this collection for that, but as far as I know, this is my only way to play Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo on the Saturn or PlayStation. So for that reason, yes, I do very much appreciate this collection. Glad I have them in my collection. And then this game, this is kind of like a real oddity in the Street Fighter series. This game is called Street Fighter 2 Movie, and this is the PlayStation version. It was also released for the Saturn, and this is Street Fighter 2 FMV game that uses footage from the Street Fighter 2 animated movie. I've done a full review of this game, so I'll put a link in the description. But suffice it to say that yes, this game is pretty boring. Essentially, you watch fight sequences from the anime, and you are playing as an android, and you're hitting the button at the appropriate times to try to scan data from the fighters. That way you can build up the strength of your android. That way there's a fight at the end of the game where you must play as the android and you fight against Ryu, and depending on how well you did at scanning things in the game leading up to that, depends on it changes how fast and strong the android is at the end of the game. So when I played through it, I always end up being really weak and slow and losing the fight because yeah, scanning at all the right times in this game isn't exactly all that easy. But yes, this is a weird, quirky title in the Street Fighter series, just something kind of really random. So not a great game by any stretch of the imagination, but just being a big Street Fighter fan, when I saw this sitting on a shelf, I believe it wasn't even a hard off, it was a chain of stores called Geo that also sells secondhand games. When I saw this sitting on the shelf, I was like, oh, I obviously have to have that Street Fighter game based on the anime, FMV, just, yeah. Anyway, if you're a Street Fighter fan, a collector of sorts, then you'll probably want to have this in your collection just as like a talking piece, I guess. You're probably not going to play it that much. But anyway, yeah, Street Fighter 2 movie, definitely an interesting game to be sure. And yeah, those games all tie into Street Fighter 2 on my 32-bit consoles. Alright, next up, a game that I actually like a lot, and you know, I've learned that there are a number of other people that like it as well, even though it has a bad reputation. This is Street Fighter Real Battle on Film, or Street Fighter the movie, the game. This is another one that I've reviewed, and another one I'll put a link in the description for, shameless plug. So, again, I said in the review, and I'll say it again, I don't understand the bad rep that this game has, because aside from the cheesy graphics, which I personally like, it's charming in a way. I like that there's a game out there where if I want to, I can play as Joanna Man. I can play a Street Fighter game that has Joanna Man in it, and Jean-Claude Van Damme, and Raul Julia, and that guy that was in The Last of the Mohicans, and Kylie Minogue, yeah, and the guy that plays Leatherface now, or has been playing Leatherface, at least in the remakes, the ones that I know of, that's the guy that plays Zangief in these movies. So I can play a fighting game where I can play as the guy that now plays Leatherface, so that's pretty damn cool. But aside from the graphics, it plays just like Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. So I like the gameplay, obviously. It plays pretty good. The graphics, like I said, I like just because of the kind of camp factor. And the soundtrack in this game is actually outstanding. It's a really good soundtrack. So yeah, damn the haters out there. Street Fighter Real Battle on Film. I like this game a lot. It is Joanna Man certified. Really great game. Happy to have both versions in my collection.
Oh no! I can't take this anymore! I am not gonna... You always make a decision by yourself! No!
Street Fighter EX plus Alpha. Combinio.
Okay, next up we have a game that I played a lot with my friends when we were kids. That's Street Fighter EX plus Alpha, and I also have Street Fighter EX2 here, which I didn't actually play until much later. So I'll say I like EX2, all the additional characters in it, but they took out like my favorite character from EX, which is Alan, which really upset me, because I always thought he was cool because he he kind of looks like Chuck Norris but sounds like Bruce Lee. So I love Alan Schneider. But EX2 is a cool game in its own right. But the original EX plus Alpha, I can't tell you how much me and my friends played this game when we were like, I want to say we were like 13, maybe 12 or 13 years old. A couple of my friends would come over to my house and we would play a lot of games together, but when we started playing EX plus Alpha, like, you couldn't get us off it. We would just sit there and play this game for hours and hours and hours, and it was just kind of like a thing that whenever we were all at my house, this was just a game we had to play. And to this day, I still really love this game. Excellent 3D graphics, but it still plays like good old-fashioned 2D Street Fighter game, except you can sidestep around things, which is just like a little bonus move, I guess. But for the most part, it plays just like any other 2D Street Fighter game. It's fun. I love the roster in this. Like I said, I love Alan Schneider. He's one of my favorite characters, like, in the history of Street Fighter. And I'm very happy that they're bringing him and the other EX characters back for this new game that Arika is working on. That's got me excited. But Alan and Skullomania and all of the Street Fighter characters they had in it, you know, Ken and Ryu are obviously old standbys, and Sakura and Chun-Li. Sakura was like in everything, like Street Fighter Alpha 2, but then also in Street Fighter EX, but then they also put her in Rival Schools, and she's also shows up in Pocket Fighter. So just Sakura was becoming kind of like the character that showed up in everything. But love the roster of characters in this. Again, I love all the Street Fighter characters and all the original Arika characters, and this game was just so much fun. So just like for a nostalgia factor, this is actually one of my favorite Street Fighter games. Still love to play it today. But Street Fighter EX plus Alpha, Street Fighter EX2, great games by Arika, published by Capcom, and I'm looking forward to the new Arika Fighter. It's going to be great. But yes, the EX games are definitely awesome. Very happy to have these in my collection. Lots and lots of nostalgia for this game in particular.
始まる。
Capcom.
The original Street Fighter Zero, both for the Saturn and for the PlayStation. I actually did not play this game until after I had played Street Fighter Alpha 2. So I guess it wasn't, I mean, it wasn't quite as impactful as, you know, if I would have played it first. If I would have played this before Alpha 2 as a kid, I probably would have been like totally blown away by it, because I do still really like this game. It plays really well. I love the character designs. The Alpha series character designs are actually my favorite. I guess I can go ahead and say that the Alpha or Zero series is my favorite series of Street Fighter games. It's the one I've played the most, and I love the character designs. I love that they went for a very anime-inspired look, and just the sprites themselves and all of the stages. Everything is like very colorful. At the time, I was really impressed by the graphics in these games. I felt like I was playing an anime, playing a cartoon. So I do enjoy the graphics very much. The soundtrack is also really good. This one has like an oddly like jazzy soundtrack to it, which like the later games in the Zero series kind of like picked up the energy, made them sound more like typical 90s Capcom games. I guess the music was done by Alpha Lyla. But yeah, the soundtrack in here is still good. The gameplay is excellent. It's just the roster isn't like all that big compared to like the later Zero games, and there's no custom combos or anything like that. But this is the first attempt at making Street Fighter a little more, I guess, like contemporary at the time. I believe when this game came out, Darkstalkers was already out, and Darkstalkers had the, you know, combo system where you could go from light, medium to heavy. So this game actually features that as well. You can do quick little 3-hit combos. it introduces the super combo gauge that has multiple levels of power to it, so that carried on throughout the rest of the series, and pretty much like most of the Street Fighter games that would follow. So for just all the things that this game introduced, it's you know, I guess worthy of respect, and it's still a fun play. And yeah, I like it a lot. It's the worst of the alpha games, and it's still absolutely amazing. So yes, Street Fighter Zero on the Saturn and the PlayStation. Just an awesome game, and a really great introduction to this new Street Fighter series that would eventually become my favorite. Okay, now we come to Street Fighter 02. Here's the Saturn version and the PlayStation version, and this is another game that I have a lot of nostalgia for. I first played this game, I want to say, maybe in 1996 or 7. I had rented it for my PlayStation, and up to this point, all I'd ever played was Street Fighter 2, and this was like something that just blew me away. The graphics were very striking. Again, like I said with the original Zero, like I felt like I was playing a cartoon. The designs of the characters, the look of the stages, the way everything animated so like smoothly and fluidly, and there were lots of like cool effects. It just so yeah, the graphics initially blew me away, and the character designs. At that time, I had gotten more into anime. I was enjoying watching anime whenever I could on television, or picking up the occasional VHS at Suncoast Video. So when I played this new Street Fighter game that had a very anime style look to it, I was just immediately hooked by that. The gameplay is just outstanding, especially like, I mean, both versions are great. Like I said, I prefer to play my 2D fighters on my Saturn, and just absolutely arcade perfect, really super smooth, excellent gameplay. Brings back the super combo system from the first Street Fighter Zero, but then introduces the custom combo system, which I thought was very cool. The roster is amazing. They added a lot of new characters, some that I didn't recognize because I hadn't played the original Street Fighter at this time, but you know, they threw in Gin and Birdie. And then they threw in also Sakura. This is actually the debut of Sakura, which was a character I liked immediately because she more or less played like Ryu or Ken. It's just her moves were like a little funky, and she's got like personality to her. Again, I was just getting into anime really at this time, and so the whole like schoolgirl sailor suit thing was still like new to me, so it was something that I thought was kind of cool. But graphics, gameplay, and the soundtrack in this game is amazing. That's one thing I'll say about this game over Street Fighter 03, which I'm about to talk about in a minute. I definitely prefer the soundtrack in 02. It's just, there's something, it's so damn catchy. Some of my favorite songs from this game, one, Sakura's stage theme is awesome. So is Charlie's. His is just really great. Guy's, and I love Guy's stage as well, with all the Final Fight characters in the back. So there's a lot of stuff aesthetically that I like about this game more than 03. But just in general, this game is amazing. I think it's one of the best 2D fighters ever made. I love it. There's nostalgia for it, but also I can just take it off the shelf, play it anytime, because it plays like a dream. Anyway, Street Fighter 02 on the Saturn and on the PlayStation. If for some reason anybody watching this video has never played Street Fighter 2, do yourself a favor, go and pick up either a copy of this or the Street Fighter Alpha Anthology. They're both extremely cheap. You can find them for like $10 on eBay, and then just get ready to play one of the best 2D fighters ever made, Street Fighter 2. Absolutely love it.
Get ready, fighters!
鍛えろ俺イズムそして奴らが帰ってきたシリーズ集大成プレイステーションストリートファイター03
Okay, and now we come to my favorite Street Fighter game of all time. If you saw my top 10 Capcom fighting game list, then you know that that is Street Fighter 03. I have the Saturn and PlayStation versions here. I will say that the Saturn version is more or less the definition of arcade perfect. It uses the 4 MB RAM expansion cart, so just as far as the look of the game, the sound of the game, and the gameplay, yes, it's pretty much perfect, but two things: this did not come out in the United States, and also, even if it did, I did not have a Sega Saturn growing up. I had the PlayStation version of this game, which is still absolutely amazing. The gameplay is fantastic, the graphics, sound, the sheer number of gameplay modes, it's all there. And I don't know how many hours I spent playing this game as a kid. I would play through the arcade mode with every character, I would play through the World Tour mode with every character. On an almost weekly basis, really, a handful of my friends would come over and we would have Alpha 3 tournaments where we would play like first to 50 wins or something like that. It was between this and Tekken 3 and Darkstalkers 3 and Guilty Gear. We split our time up playing a lot of fighting games, and most weekends we would do that, just sit around in my room and just play fighting games for hours and hours and hours and just never go to sleep. And this is one that was always in the rotation. Again, it's my favorite Street Fighter game. The roster, I think, is the best roster that's ever been in a Street Fighter game. Lots of new characters like Julie, Junie, Rainbow, Mika, Karen, a bunch of older Street Fighter characters that hadn't been in an alpha game yet, like Fei Long and Balrog and Guile. So just the roster is amazing. The gameplay is fantastic. For me, it never gets old. Again, I was just so happy that they included so many different gameplay modes. I was happy to have something other than just an arcade mode to play. The World Tour mode was a lot of fun. And then this is also the game that made me get a Pocket Station, because I had watched a video on a PlayStation Underground Jam Pack where they were showing off the Pocket Station mini games that you could play with Street Fighter 3, and it looked like a lot of fun. You could essentially take your characters you're building up in World Tour mode, download them to your Pocket Station, and then play like they're a little Tamagotchi or something. You can play little mini games and build up their strength, and then upload them back and into your game, and then play with them on your PlayStation. So I thought that was really cool. So yes, this is the game that inspired me to get a Pocket Station, just because I wanted to continue the Street Fighter Alpha 3 experience. But yeah, really, I don't know what else to say. The graphics, the sound design, the roster, the gameplay modes. This is just, for me, this is the perfect 2D fighting game. It's my favorite Street Fighter game, my favorite Capcom fighting game, potentially my favorite fighting game of all time. And I think I've said enough. Street Fighter 3, it is awesome.
This is arcade quality. X-Men vs. Street Fighter. Sega Saturn.
Okay, and finally we have the Versus games. So here we have X-Men vs. Street Fighter for the PlayStation and the Sega Saturn, and also Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter for the PlayStation and Sega Saturn. And I will say that no matter what version of these games you play, you're gonna have fun because they're good games. But the Saturn version is by far the superior version of either game, primarily because if you take a look at this very handsome X-Men vs. Street Fighter box, it's a big old box, and that's because there is a 4 megabyte RAM expansion cart included in the box. And with the aid of that expansion cart, these are essentially arcade perfect ports of these games. So the graphics, gameplay, sound, everything is kept completely intact, and these versions were never released in the United States. So growing up, I just rented the PlayStation versions a lot because I did still really like them. But one really, like, you know, a black mark on the PlayStation versions is they do not include tag fighting, which is just a crime. In those versions, you essentially pick your character you're going to play as, and then you pick a secondary that you can call in to do assist attacks and things like that. But there's no actual tag fighting, which is a real shame, because that's a big draw of these games, is that you can choose potentially one Street Fighter character, one X-Men character, or 2 Street Fighter characters, 2 X-Men characters, and it's tag fighting. You can team up your favorite characters. You can pair up Wolverine and Gambit, which was always my favorite pairing, and that's just awesome, because growing up, I was obviously a big Street Fighter fan, but I was like a huge X-Men fan. I liked Marvel comics in general, but primarily I collected X-Men comics. I collected the X-Men trading cards, and I thought the X-Men cartoon series that aired on Fox Kids was just like the best television show in the history of mankind. So when I first came to realize there was an X-Men versus Street Fighter video game, I lost my shit. I thought it was the absolute greatest thing ever bestowed upon mankind. And so, having played the arcade version as a kid, and then renting the PlayStation port of X-Men vs. Street Fighter, and just, it wasn't as good. It was still a fun game, and I rented it many a times. Just the removal of the tag feature was kind of disappointing. Also, the Japanese versions of these of Marvel's superheroes vs. Street Fighter, at least, does have the exclusive character of Narimaro. So fun character to play as, kind of I don't know, like not an Easter egg, but just like a quirky little addition for the console version. But if you got the US version and you didn't get to play as Narimaro, I think they included Venom instead, right? Was the character in the game instead of Narimaro, which is preferable. But if you didn't get to play as Narimaro, don't feel too bad. You weren't missing that much. He is a fun character to play as, but he's not essential for the game. But yeah, the versus games, X-Men vs. Street Fighter, Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter, but really X-Men vs. Street Fighter is the one that has like the most nostalgia for me. It's the one that I play most often. This is my preference. I might even like this maybe more than the Marvel vs. Capcom games. I definitely like it more than like MVC3, and I haven't played Infinite yet, but I'll almost guarantee that I'll prefer this game over that one. Anyway, though, X-Men vs. Street Fighter and Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter, these games are great. They're some of my favorite fighting games for sure, and if you've never played them, you definitely need to. And if you have the opportunity to pick up the Saturn versions, do it. They are the superior versions. They are arcade perfect. They are masterpieces of video game playing, and that's it. Those are all the 32-bit Street Fighter games in my collection. Again, I think that this is the best era for Street Fighter and for Capcom fighting games in general. There was just like so much good stuff coming out. But pretty much any time, day or night, however I'm feeling, I can pull any of these games off the shelf and enjoy playing them. Let me get the stack out here. So yes, there they are, 32-bit Street Fighter games. You can never go wrong with those. So everybody, thanks for watching. I'd love to hear down in the comments what some of your favorite Street Fighter games are, and what some of your favorite Capcom fighting games are, just in general. What are some of your memories of playing Street Fighter Alpha 2, Street Fighter the movie, the game, X-Men versus Street Fighter? I'd love to hear about that kind of stuff. Next time, I will go over all of the 6th and 7th generation Street Fighter games in my collection, because I have those for the Dreamcast and the PS2 and the Xbox 360 and whatever else. But I knew that this was going to be like the bigger one, because I have just all these damn Street Fighter games. What can I say? A man's got an obsession, you got to satiate it. Anyway, yeah, if you sat through the whole thing, thanks a bunch for being patient and listening to me ramble on about Street Fighter. And thanks for watching, everybody. Take care. I will see you next time. Goodbye.